Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be going over our short stories lecture notes. We're going to start off. I'm going to introduce to you the stories, tell you a little bit about them. We're then going to go over the literary terms that you're going to need to know. Some of them are going to be a review from last time. There are going to be some new ones as well. We're going to go over plot structure and how different short stories and novels follow a similar plot structure. Then we're going to go over different kinds of characters. The short stories. The first one that we're going to be reading is called The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell. And in this story, a shipwrecked sailor wakes up on an island in the Caribbean. Now, it's an interesting story, mostly because of the different contrast and what we would think of. Usually when we think about being on an island in the Caribbean, it is a great situation. However, this man is shipwrecked. And we're also going to be discussing what is game. The word game has many different possible meanings, and obviously this one has an interesting twist to it. We're going to be reading next a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, one of the greatest American authors of all time. This one is called The Cask of Amontillado. The story is about a man named Montresor, and who is our narrator, and also a character named Fortunato. This has been called the ultimate tale of revenge, and it also deals with how far is too far. And below there we have a picture of a crypt, catacombs, place where dead bodies are kept. We can see the skulls. After we're done with that, we're going to be reading A Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. In this story, it's about a group of hunters who go back in time, and their main target here is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Obviously, in this case, things can go very wrong. Something that Bradbury is looking at, and what we are going to be looking at, is whether or not our actions influence the future. And finally, one of my favorite stories is The Lady or the Tiger, written by Frank Stockton. In this story, a man is on trial for his life, and one of the themes that we're going to be looking at is whether or not he can trust the woman that he loves. We're also going to be looking at how strong is the power of love. Is it stronger than jealousy? Is it stronger than hatred? We will find out as we read. Alright, the first literary term that we're going to be looking at is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is the use of hints or clues to suggest what will happen later on in literature. Basically, it's just hinting at things to come. Next up is setting, again, a review. Setting is the time and place in fiction. When and where are things taking place? We're going to be looking at mood. For those of you who are still struggling with mood and tone, it's okay, we'll get it. Alright, mood is the emotional attitude. Alright, it's also the atmosphere that an author creates with a work of writing. Down below in the right corner, it says it was a dark and stormy night. The rain fell in torrents. Now, this could be, it's establishing a setting, it's also establishing a mood. Usually a dark and stormy night, usually something bad is going to happen. It's all about the mood that the author is establishing. It is very similar to tone. And tone is the attitude that a writer writes with. It's the attitude towards the subject or a character. Okay, tones can be serious, sarcastic, they can be satirical, they can be objective. Alright, again, and we see some different tones down below. Alright, there's jubilant or happy, there's sad, there's someone in awe or also impressed. The next term we're going to be looking at now is different kinds of conflict. While you may be familiar with conflict, This is the first time we're going over it in this year. So be familiar with the three different kinds of conflict. There's man versus man, man versus nature. These are both external conflicts. A man or woman is dealing with something outside of him or herself. That is why it is called external. Man versus man and man versus nature. There's also an internal conflict called man versus self. This is when a person has a moral dilemma. Metaphor. Alright, this is when we compare two unlike things. We do not use the words like or as. In this example below, men are pigs, comparing men to the qualities of having, comparing men to pigs, saying that men have pig-like qualities. We don't use the words like or as because that's what similes do. A simile uses the words like or as. If we look down at the example, it says, can we pretend that airplanes in the night sky are like shooting stars? Comparing airplanes to shooting stars using the words like. Also in the picture down below, we have someone being like a melody in your head that you can't keep out of your mind. Being like a melody. Alright, there are three different kinds of irony here. Verbal irony. Verbal irony is when the author says one thing but means something else. Another term for this is also pictured down below. It is sarcasm. Verbal irony is just another word for sarcasm. We also have dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is when we know something, or the audience knows something, that a character in the story does not know. We will see a few examples of this as we read. There's also irony of a situation. Irony of a situation is a discrepancy or a difference between what is expected and what actually happens. For example, the Titanic was called the unsinkable ship. It was said that God himself could not sink this ship, and on its maiden voyage, the Titanic sank. That is an example of irony of a situation, or situational irony. Symbol. A symbol is an object or action that means more than its literal meaning. There are many symbols. For instance, the one pictured down below, the symbol for peace. The symbol itself, a circle with some lines through it, don't necessarily mean anything, literally. However, figuratively, it is the symbol for peace. We have other examples as well. Theme. Once again, I realize this is a review, but it is extremely important that you understand the concept of theme. Theme is the general idea or insight about life that a writer wishes to express. It's important to know that all elements of a story can contribute to the theme. It's usually stated in a sentence. So for example, after reading a book, a poem, an essay, anything, I think the author wants me to understand this. Whatever you would finish that sentence with is the theme. It is what the author wants you to understand. Personification. Personification is giving human qualities to animals or objects. If you look down below, it says the angry sky roared and threw lightning around. We have a few examples here. First off, the sky cannot be angry, it cannot roar, and it could not throw anything. We have three examples of personification in that one sentence. The gentle wind softly kissed my cheeks as I walked. The wind does not have lips, therefore they cannot kiss. Because of that, this is an example of personification. Alright, moving on to plot structure. Alright, first off, you need to understand what plot is. And plot is a sequence of events that happen in a story. And there is a typical format to this. We start off with the exposition. Please write this down in your notes. Draw this diagram. We start off with the exposition. You're probably more familiar with the word introduction. The exposition is the introduction. Then we have our rising action, which is going to take up the majority of the story until we reach the moment of highest intrigue, and that is going to be the climax. That's usually the most entertaining or most interesting, most suspenseful part of a story. Then there is a brief falling action, and finally a resolution, where we find out what happens in the end to our characters. So please do not write all of this unless you are having a very difficult time understanding what an exposition is. The exposition, like I said, is the introduction of a story. Usually in this we're going to get background information about characters, about the setting, anything like that, so that we're able to understand the full story. Usually the exposition ends with what's called the inciting incident. It's the initial event that triggers the rest of the story. Basically, what is one thing that happens that puts the rest of the story in motion? The rising action. The rising action is all of the events that lead up to the climax. If you look at the example below, in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry has to go through a set of tasks to reach where the Sorcerer's Stone is hidden, where he will have the final battle. These tasks are the rising action, whereas the final battle would be the climax. And like I said before, the climax is the high point. It's the most exciting part of the story. This is where everything that is built, all the conflict, leads and finally reaches a peak. Okay, it's usually the greatest moment of the greatest danger or decision making for the protagonist. It's usually the part of the story or a movie even that you are most entertained by. The falling action. In the falling action is usually the moments immediately following the climax. It's usually what happens because of the climax. You can be anywhere from a chapter in a novel to a single sentence in a short story. And finally we have our resolution. It's basically the conclusion of our story. And this is where, there's not going to be tense, there's not going to be a lot of anxiety. This is where we finally figure out what happens to all of our characters and all of the conflict that are involved in our story. Okay, different types of characters. The first type of character that you need to know is the protagonist. This is the main character in a story, a novel, a drama, or some other literary work. This is the character that we empathize with, we feel sorry for, we understand. It's also usually our hero. There are some cases where this is not always the case, though. Next up is our antagonist. This is the person who opposes the hero. This is the evil person, usually. This is the one that is creating the story's conflict. So if there is a hero, say in Batman, the new one, Batman would be our protagonist, whereas Bane would be our antagonist. If you want to go to the Dark Knight, the Joker would be our antagonist from that movie. Next up is static characters. A static character is a character that is usually minor. However, they do not change at all. There are times when a static character can be a major character, but the key thing that you need to understand here is that static characters do not go through any sort of change whatsoever throughout the entire story. They differ from dynamic characters. Alright? A dynamic character is a major character who encounters the conflict and is changed by the conflict. They go through some revelation and they are changed by it somehow. They are usually changed by the conflict. These are usually round characters, which are complex. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please email me, talk to me after class, anything at all. please don't hesitate to ask, and good luck on the test.